Hi, everyone. Welcome to Extra Hours. I'm sitting in for Grant today. My name's Alex Lindsay, just in case you're wondering. I know I'm not around here very often, but I thought I'd introduce myself there. From Adelaide, Australia, we've got Carl Asmussen. Hey, Carl.
Good morning from tomorrow. Hello, everyone.
From the future, from Beaumont, Texas, we've got Jeff Keithley. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, good to be back home.
And from Raleigh, North Carolina, Mike Muddy Schlegel. Good to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here this evening.
Thanks, Muddy. And from Port Coquitlam, did I get that right, Alex? Port Coquitlam?
You got it.
Okay, I'm working on it.
Good to be here.
I haven't said it often enough yet, but Alex Knight here is with us as well. So a great panel for today. And before we get started, I'm going to go around the horn. And I'm going to ask you, what was the coolest thing you saw at NAB? Yeah, no, not everyone went to NAB, but of all the NAB announcements, what was the coolest thing? I'm going to start with Jeff.
For me, was probably seeing Blackmagic come out with Blackmagic Cloud.
Yeah, it's pretty nifty. It's a little, you
The
can tell they were
validation.
trying. The validation, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that it's a validation, but I think everybody in the cloud goes, oh no, like our margins are now going to get squeezed really hard, because Blackmagic's going to come in at 1/10 the cost, and at first it's going to be free. They're going to have some kind of beta and everything else, and they're going to figure out what it takes, and then they're going to start turning and with Blackmagic, they always want to do it for as little as they can possibly. Everyone else, I think, tries to figure out how much can we charge for this. Blackmagic's like, how little can we charge for this? So
right after that, it was a camera operations from AIR, Advanced Image Robotics. They have a tracking camera solution that's using true AI, not fake AI, and that was amazing. Seeing what they were doing with a cloud-oriented, it was actually going across the country to a server in, I think it was US East is where they were working from, and that server was telling the camera what to do, and they're tracking, and I've been using tracking for years, and I've never seen anything like that. Yeah.
Wow, AIR.
Yeah,
So
really good.
What's that again? AIR stands for again?
Advanced Image Robotics. It's a very unique PTZ. It actually can do this.
Is it a PTZ head or a camera itself?
It's a Z-Cam on a head, and so it's a complete package, and it's primarily ran by an iPad. Honestly, that's the primary interface. And so when you're trying to follow, we're actually using a pair of them in the racing stuff we started picking up. The client had picked up those, and you would touch where you want the camera to go, and that's how you kind of move it. Instead of a joystick kind of feel. It's a very different way of doing it, but their tracking is where it's really going to be at. I was really impressed.
Interesting. Carl, what did you see on the announcements?
So Blackmagic Cloud on top of Jeff, but along with that there was two things from Blackmagic that came out that people haven't really talked about. So one was their new DeckLink card, which was the 100 gig fiber. Now so what people may have missed was in the past we've had a DeckLink card that can do 4 channels simultaneous in, or 4 channels simultaneous out of 12G, or you can flip them so you can have 2 in and 2 out of 12G. And we have another one that does 8 high definition, so 3G in, or 8 3G out, or a combination, because you can flip them. What this does out of the box, Grant did say there would be updates coming for this card most likely, is it can do 8 12G in and 8 12G out simultaneously. So it's technically 16 channels. And it's redundant, so you can send them out to 2 different places without even going through a switch, because it has 2 outputs. But he has said that this, because that's the same amount of bit rate as 32 high definition in, or 3G in, and 32 3G out simultaneously. So that one card, I know it's $2,000, but for people who need it and you want to put it into a Mac Pro, so if you understand how that works and kind of where that fits into your workflow, what problems that solves for your production, that's a big one. The other thing they came out with, which is one that I've been waiting for forever as far as their pipeline, is essentially a 4K streaming bridge. Now they're calling them Streaming Decoder and Streaming Encoder now, so they've just changed the names a little bit. But the Streaming Decoder, which is a 4K one, which is H.265 SRT, RTMP, so it does all the stuff. That's a big one, because now we can actually get 4G content back and forth, or more importantly, Quad HD. Because Blackmagic had no Quad HD version for this. So if you want to send 4 HDs and you want to not use the cloud option, because the cloud will resynchronize stuff. So there's a press release back in December on how they do that. But if you want to simply do your own protocol and not use Blackmagic Cloud, you can actually do this. Now you can put 4 HD signals and keep them gen locked, because they can be gen locked right through, and they came out the other end gen locked as well, because they accept a reference in as well, which is pretty cool. So now you can have gen locked in the HD world, because before you had to go to AJA had this solution, and there were some other ones. Tascam has a 4K encoder decoder as well. But now in the because the thing is, camera control can go back up the other way and tally and talk back. So that's the other things that go the other direction is from your ATEM switcher, or essentially your production truck or whatever you're using. So I think that's a really, even though people just see it as it's a 4K streaming bridge, what it now gives you, it gives you 4 channels that are locked in, well, it's synchronized in gen lock. If you're doing HD workflow, and if you're doing a 4K workflow, this is the only option now, because before this, from a Blackmagic device, you would have to go into something like VLC. So you could do 4K out of the original 4K web presenter, but to receive that, there was no box that they made. Well, before now, there was no box they made, so you had to use something like VLC or some other SRT or RTMP receiver to receive that 4K signal and then do what you want with it after that. So VLC is obviously an easy one to do. But now they have this box which has a bidirectional, no bidirectional video. It would be nice if they could send HD video up the other way, so you could send program up the other way. But that's actually something they have solved with Blackmagic Cloud. So as Jeff said, Blackmagic Cloud is a big one because it actually solves all those problems. But if you want to avoid Blackmagic Cloud, and have maybe lower latency, but latency is not really a big issue with that because it's more of a one direction out the program. But that's so that 4K streaming decoder is also another piece of the puzzle that will solve a lot of issues that people may have with remote productions or remote contributions.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting when we think about the cloud is that you have this, you have a switcher and you have these captures and you have all these other bits and pieces, and then you have cameras that they're adding all the Ethernet to, and SRT capabilities and shading capabilities and everything else. I think that we get the sense that you're going to be able to drop a panel, like the new little panels that they have and the new little shading units that they have and everything else. You kind of get that eventually you're just going to plug a camera into an Ethernet and you start shading it. You're cutting it in the cloud. It's one of those things that they may benefit to the level of watching what everybody else did for a little while and then taking the ecosystem that they already have and then just applying it to it. And where a lot of the cloud companies haven't invested as much is that whole hardware ecosystem. They have parts of it, obviously Vector can get connected to a control panel, so can a Carbonite, but they don't have the cameras. They don't have the, there's all these other pieces of the ecosystem that kind of Blackmagic kind of brings along with it that makes things really complicated, and that their little switcher panels are a lot less expensive than everybody else's. So they're, whether it's a 4ME or 2ME or 1ME or the little compact, they're all less expensive. So I think that's going to be the expense process is going to be really interesting. MADI, what did you see?
Well, I got to live vicariously through, actually, I enjoyed the tour, Alex, that you and Grant had done through NAB. There were a number of things in the announcements that came out. I thought the G2 ATEM Mini is interesting. It's not something I'm rushing out to get. For people who are feeding audio directly through the ATEM Mini, it's a big upgrade to have XLR kind of pro inputs there. Lots of interesting kind of follow-up videos around what it means, some of the disappointment without it being 4K, and maybe there's some strategy there to it. I thought it was interesting. The two other things actually from the tour that I saw, I think it was the Sony booth. So Jeff was actually talking about some of the AI tracking, and my understanding is that Sony came out with a new tracking software, tracking update for their cameras, including the FR7s. It's going to be a big upgrade. I heard Blue talking about how excited he was on extra hours for that from NAB. And then I think it was at the Sony booth, but Alex, you were geeking out about this controller with the wheels that was moving this kind of panhead.
Oh, that was DJI.
DJI. Okay.
Yeah. That it's a digital gear head, and I walk by that gear head every year. I don't know. It's been 7 or 8 years, and I just love gear heads, and I almost so there was one show where we had a long lens on a camera, and the person was walking back and forth on the, you know, on the stage. And just for fun, we happened to get one of those. It was like an Orion or whatever. It's a smaller. They were out for a second, and we had one, and so we decided to just do the pan with, you know, with the. And it looked so much better, so much better than a fluid head. That and when I get fluid heads, I mean, I get 2060s and 2575s, and you know, big, heavy. You know, like I want it to look good, but you have people pacing back and forth. And when we took that gear head, when someone's pacing back and forth with a gear head, you're like, no problem. Like, and everything's all just kind of just easing back and forth in a way that you just don't see. There's something about it that you don't. It doesn't look the same when you're doing a fluid head. Even if someone's really good at the fluid head, it's just not quite as soft as the gear head. I was like, oh, I got to have one of these. But they're, you know, like a good one is a lot of money. And these DJIs are like any Ronin, you know, RS just ties into it. And you're like, okay, now I have a gear head, you know. And so anyway, so I've been in love with that thing forever. I don't have any good business reason to buy one, so I don't have one. But
And was it physically connected between the controller and the head? Because it was like crane mounted, right? The actual head on it.
It doesn't have to be. So it's typically wired, you know, but it doesn't have to be. It can be over Wi-Fi, which is kind of scary. But it is, but it has some. It can also, I think, do some kind of RF as well. But I mean, anyway, yeah. So I've seen it in lots of different configurations. It's been at the DJI booth for a long time. You know, like, and I always walk up to it. This was the most aggressive one because it was on the top of a car, you know, like, and you can run it. And I do believe there's an RF version of it because, you know, DJI understands RF really well, but so that you can put it in a follow car, you know, so you can literally be driving behind a car with an arm coming down and you're sitting there with a gear head, you know, controlling the head. And you're just like, oh, okay, that's cool. So.
Well, I'll be interested to see what the office hours plan for NAB is next year. I think that may be my first year to be there on site. So looking forward to it.
No, it was fun. We had a good time. I will say that for me, I you know, in the DJI booth, I got to finally pick up a Ronin 40, which I've been kind of like looking at, thinking about, and picking it up, and you know, picking up the chicken head. And it is, you know, much heavier than I expected, which is, you know, why, you know, but it was great. And immediately I understood why we were using one the next day for a show. So my curiosity was already there. And so but I could understand why everybody wanted to make sure they had an easy rig. They're like, we're going to have an easy rig for the 40, right? And I'm like, sure. You know, like, you know, we ordered an easy rig for it. And, yeah, so I was able to use it, play with it there, run around, and then immediately the next day we were shooting with one, and it's
stabilized, but it's so heavy that your view just gets lower and lower and lower through the day.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, we put it on an easy rig, and DJI makes their own easy rig for it, so it's like a back plate with batteries and all kinds of other stuff that you can kind of wire in. So it was it turned out to be super successful. It doesn't have quite the same trim as a Steadicam. We had a Steadicam and the Ronin and a drone for something else, and so it doesn't have the same quite the same trim as the Steadicam, but it can go places that the Steadicam can't go. We can go between things and all kinds of other stuff. It's cool. So, Alex, did you see anything cool?
You know, the only thing that I paid attention to was the Blackmagic stuff, and in particular, the new ATEM ISO Extreme G2. Now, I had a feeling that they were going to do balanced audio inputs, but I didn't expect them to go as far as they did with the announcement, from everything from the higher end buttons to the CFexpress more professional media format for recording to, you know, 10G internet. I mean, MADI really threw me off. I did not expect to have MADI inputs on that thing as well. You know, I'm waiting for the in-depth reviews to see how this thing actually operates in the real world. I have the first gen HDMI ISO, and it's working okay, but I've had some problems with the streaming capabilities. I've had some weird issues with ISO recording, although that's gotten better with the latest firmware. So, you know, I'm looking at all those little areas of weakness that those switchers have to see if, you know, have they improved, have they made changes to the network stack, that kind of stuff. But the thing that immediately impacts my week to week, the work that I do, is I installed the DaVinci Resolve 20 Beta 1 that is out now just to test the new AI multicam edit. And I tried it out on a 90-minute podcast and immediately panicked and said, well, there goes all my podcast client editing work.
So you just turned it on and just cut the whole show? It
cut the whole show, and it did a ridiculously good job. Like, I just like very, I'm stunned. I'm absolutely
Fortunately,
stunned.
your client doesn't listen to the show, so you're just like, oh,
yeah.
you know, yeah.
Exactly.
So it just, and
remarkable.
Does it get reaction shots as well, or does it just?
It does. It tracks faces, and there were, when I played back the entire episode, and I made a few minor tweaks, because it was doing the ISO record. It did cut a few times to the wrong camera, but I understand why I did that. It's because the person that was sitting in the chair leaned back like this into the frame of the other camera, and the tracking caught their face, and it cut to that. So, I mean, for Beta 1, it is really impressive.
It'll be interesting to see with multicam, like whether it's really good with discussions, but can it also do, like a play or something else? You know, like how does it handle when things get more complex? So it'll be interesting to see. I've got some more complex stuff to play with. Yeah, that's really interesting. All right, what questions do we have?
Yeah, we got a first question here, and this one's actually coming from me. Is the Netgear Pro AV line of switches still the recommended starter choice for those configuring Dante networks in a studio?
Go, Jeff. Nope, Jeff?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I said yes 3 times before I said yes again.
With the mic on. Now with the mic on. Yeah, exactly, yes.
Yeah, it's just simple. It's just so easy to administer, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist or have to know how to do rocket surgery, either one. I mean, you can just jump into it, go into the easy mode, and if you need to go deeper, it's there. So you just flip over to the deeper side of it. If you do, I don't ever get there. I don't have to. I've got a guy for that, but I don't have to. And I just stay on the easy side and just turn it on. And it works. That's what you want.
Yeah, and Mickey says that he said, I would recommend a Cisco CBS or Catalyst switches for someone wanting to learn how to configure their Dante networks. And I mean, really, really learn how to configure them, not just play with the fun little presets, as Mickey would say it. He said they're very useful, but the presets do not support the learning process needed for someone starting out. Craig Kadoki said there are other options, Cisco, that will give you a better bang for your buck, especially if you're not changing configs all the time. And Craig Kadoki said also that the Audinate is my set-by-set guide. Audinate has a set-by-set guide for the CBS. John Wallace said the Catalyst 9300 is his weight are my go-tos. So I do think that I think that there is a value to, as you get off the ground, having a but you really, I think, want to take the Audinate course. And for those of you listening, Audinate has their own level 1, 2, and 3 courses, and the level 1 is kind of, I think, just all network administration, and everybody talks about how great that course is. So it's free. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, this came up in a conversation before the start of the show, and I wanted to talk about it here and get everyone's input. So I appreciate everyone that mentioned all those different switches. I'll take a look at that. I had a bit of a boo-boo last night because I updated so my switch that I use is a 24-port switch. It's made by Cisco. They don't make it anymore. It's the 2960-L, and it's mostly configured typically by command line, but it does have a GUI, but the GUI is very Spartan. Of course, I'm not a network engineer, and I don't really work with command line stuff. Don't really enjoy particularly having to work with it, but I did this firmware update, and it said the update was successful, and I refreshed the page, and all of a sudden the GUI just went poof, just disappeared. So there's no GUI. Switch is working perfectly fine, but it can only be adjusted by command line now. I had a networking engineer friend of mine come in, and he's trying to figure out why the GUI just disappeared. So that's the issue that I'm dealing with now.
It does sound like you're up for a new switch. So yeah, that's a little scary. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
my question to those people out there that suggested the Cisco's, number one, that Catalyst 9300, look that price up and make sure you're sitting down. And you, depending on the type of car you drive, you might be able to trade it 1-for-1 for some of those guys. Now you can get those used on the used market, but you're still talking about a long haul to get it to really tweak. And or you have to have friends like John or maybe Mickey, would be awake another hour to help you, but it's going to be too much to handle. For me, I didn't want to be an IT guy. I had to learn IT. So for me, I just want stuff to work. And that's why I went the M4250s route and 4300s. Now we're using 4350s in a couple of our core places, but that's the whole reason. It's just easy, and I can do the work that I want to do, not the stuff that I have to piddle around with all the time. So think about how much your time and money, time is money. So if you can just jump in, pull a couple presets and be happy and everything work, go for it.
Yeah, just the last point that you made, I have to admit that there's time people and money people, and I'm definitely a time person. I think I've told the story before, but my wife can tell you where the cheapest gas in the town we live in, and I can always tell you every gas station with a right turn in and a right turn out. I'm not. And to me, I really thought about it that time is not money. Time is so much more valuable than money. Now you may choose to spend that time learning as well, but you can always make more money, but man, the time, it just keeps going out and it's not going to come back in, and so it's a really complex, when I think about time, I often think about, I always calculate whatever it costs to buy a product. I look at what does the interface look like? What does the setup look like? What does the maintenance look like? How much time am I going to spend on this product? And whatever that time is, I multiply it by my hourly, and then I add that to the price of the product. That's why, I buy what I buy most of the time. Next question.
Next question is from Kyle Hammond, and he's asking, I recently had an issue with the audio coming into my 6K Pro being compressed and cut out anytime the mic was overmodulated. I got a recording from the board that was clean and was told it was the same signal. Does Blackmagic Design do something in camera?
Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, before I talk about and voice my opinions on Blackmagic audio processing and audio analog to digital converters, I don't know what your gain staging was, Kyle, but it's crucial no matter what device you're going to be sending audio into to ensure that you are sending out line level signals from your mixer. I assume you probably did that. That's a very basic step. And also I assume that the signal coming into the Blackmagic 6K, check the settings in the menus and make sure that it is also set for line level, not mic level, because there's a huge difference in volume between mic signals and line level signals. That could be part of the problem. The other thing that I find, if I don't have a 6K, but if if other Blackmagic converters are using the same converters like the ATEMs that I have here, they do not take kindly to really, really hot signals. You need to leave a lot of headroom in there, because man, if they go above 0 dB FS, I mean they sound really, really bad. I mean, really, really bad. So just make sure that you're giving yourself ample headroom. I'd probably shoot for something like calibrating your entire signal chain to about negative 20 dBFS. That's dBFS full scale.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so as Alexander said, if you've done a firmware update on that camera, it may have reset your audio inputs to mic level. So make sure you go back in, because that's the thing. If you've never used mic level on those inputs, you always use line level, and you just don't think to look at those settings because you didn't change it yourself, but a firmware update may have fixed a bug in there. And when it does that, it's kind of put it back to factory settings for especially that part. So just go into your audio settings, because the only things you can change is mic level, line level, phantom power. It's pretty straightforward with the Blackmagic cameras. There is no audio processing in there simply because it's a recorder. You don't want to do audio processing on something you record, or sending straight out of the camera via HDMI in that particular camera's case. Yeah, so just make sure they're line level. You don't have to do a factory reset, but it's always good to do a factory reset when you come across a weird thing like this. Just go to factory reset, do it. But if you've got a lot of settings in there you don't want to change, but it's always a good first step to do, and make sure you have the latest firmware as well. So for latest firmware, factory reset, and then just make sure you're, as Alexander said, make sure you're on line level. It does have meters on the back, so you can actually see what's coming into those channels. So that's how you actually set your gain. So if you have an analog output, which you will have out of your mixer, then and they're coming out, let's say they're coming out of mains or aux, doesn't really matter, then essentially you set you won't be able to set anything in the camera itself for line level because it doesn't have a trim pot. I don't believe those cameras don't have a trim pot. So essentially you're going to use your analog fader and you actually look at the meters on the camera and you give it a test tone or you give it something and then you use your analog fader on the mixer because that's going to adjust the output. So this is your main out or whatever. And you look at the meters on the camera. So you want to make sure the meters on the camera aren't hitting the red. They're hitting like, the top of the green into the orange, but not into the red. And so that's how you gain stage is you adjust the volume on your analog mixer, but you meter on the camera. So you want to see what the camera's getting. And if you are like -30 on your mixer going out, that's an indicator that you're at mic level. So if you go, oh, my output's -30 to get any kind of hearable signal, that means you have mic level. And if it's showing in the camera that it's line level, but you're -30 on your mixer, factory reset. So obviously the input is on mic level, but it's showing you line level in the menu, factory reset. And that's usually kind of a bug that can come up when you do firmware updates with pretty much any device. So firmware update, factory reset, and go again.
Yeah, and I think that if reading it, I'm just not 100% sure that you didn't split it and go into the mixer and then into the camera. You got to make sure that you have something that you can control upstream of the camera. So I would never connect the camera, or I would do everything I can to avoid connecting the camera to something that's not a mixer, that is like straight to the, straight just some output. Because you do want to be able to attenuate it. I think you can attenuate the line input. I think I just did that. So I don't know, but I have so many different Blackmagic cameras. I'm not sure which ones can do what. But I thought that you could still attenuate it even if you have a line input, but I could be wrong. I haven't thought about that for a while. But you do want to make sure that you're setting tone at something like -20, making sure that you see it on the other side and it's where you think it's supposed to be. It should be, typically making sure that tone is the same all the way through the system is pretty important to making sure that everything's going to be calibrated to each other and you're getting what you expect. But that's usually the number one reason we see those issues. Next question.
From Lois Richter in Davis, California, how does one light things differently between a stage show where the audience is at a distance and a video production or Zoom call where the camera is very close?
Go ahead, Carl.
So essentially, you're always lighting the subject. Don't really care about if it's a camera or an audience member looking at them. Now, theatrical lighting has its own creative discipline compared to television production. Let's call it television production, just to make it simple. So television production does have its own, and most television production are broad lighting because they're usually multiple camera. So if you think, the best way to always think about this is think about like a TED Talk. So a TED Talk is done in front of a live audience, but it's also filmed with cameras. And it doesn't matter if it's TED or TEDx, it's really the same thing. Hopefully TEDx's get to the quality of a TED, but let's just say that. Now, for a TED Talk, it's almost in the round. So the audiences are almost 180 degrees. Most TED Talks go into, I think it's Vancouver now, and it's been down in California in the past, but they like to use these audience where they wrap around at least half, around half the stage. Now, the thing is, if you think about that, that's actually almost identical to how breakfast television is shot. So breakfast television, you got your presenters sitting on a couch, and they also have cameras that are almost in like maybe 120 degree arc. So therefore, they have to be lit from every side, regardless of who's talking, and they cut to a wide shot with all 3, 4 people. So essentially, breakfast television and TED Talks are lit the similar way, which is kind of very broad lighting for the fill light. So they have like fill light for 180 degrees, which sounds kind of crazy, but then they may have a key light, which is usually twice as intense on that subject for the key light. So that gives a bit of definition shadows. In television, they use Fresnels, and this is why people sit on very particular spots on those couches in breakfast television, because all those spots are lit and have backlight as well for their hair light. Those particular spots And sometimes it looks like they're still like giving COVID distancing because they're all so far away from each other on most breakfast television. But what's really happening is those exact spots on the couch are lit precisely with Fresnels, and then they use panel lighting, broad lighting, to do the fill lighting, which is usually at that point with a light meter will be half as intense as the Fresnels hitting that spot. It's kind of, that's it. So the rule is your Fresnels or your hard lights or your key lights are going to be at least twice as bright using a light meter at that particular spot. Then the fill lights will be panel lights, and sometimes in television studios you'll have like a dozen or 24 panel lights right around, wrapping around the whole front and around the back sometimes, and it just fills in everything. There's very few hard shadows in breakfast television, and there's very few hard shadows in TED Talks. Now, dramatic theatre, this is what I mean by, depends on what your art form is, dramatic theatre, like something like Les Mis or something, will have dramatic lighting. And that's a whole different thing, just like cinema. So I kind of equate like that kind of theatre to cinema, where you can have dramatic hard lighting, hard shadows, dark shadows, negative space, all that kind of stuff as well. But I always talk about when you're doing something like a TED Talk or breakfast television, it's your broad lighting can be quite as much as you want. Just make sure it's as half as intense as your key lighting, which can be Fresnels, it can be other things, but they're a little bit more harder, create a little bit more of a shadow.
Go, Jeff.
I hate following him. Carl, you're just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to so many technical things. I am so glad you're my friend. First off, Lois, hire Carl or somebody like maybe Twilight that really knows and understands lighting, because if you're just trying to go and put something together, you're going to be challenged, to say the least. I would agree with everything that Carl said. I would only add, hire somebody that does it all the time, because it really does. It's an art. It's a hands down an art. Whenever I go into, and the other thing is, if you don't hire them, whoever's doing lighting at the venue, they're your best friend. Bring them a monitor, put a monitor right there with them, goes, hey, this is what I look like with your lights. Gives them a little feedback, because they're used to using their naked eye 99% of the time. So I do that in my local theater. Whenever we go in there for my wife's show every year, I give them a monitor. They ask me for the monitor now. It's like, are you going to give me that monitor so I can make sure my levels are right? Like, yes, I will. I'll be glad to bring that up to you. And so we give them that. They have a reference. They can see what the lighting really looks like through the lens, and it helps us. It helps them. Everybody's happy. But yeah, that's when it comes to, she's doing dance type programs or drama type stuff. So invariably it's like, oh, the lights are too bright, we got to turn it down. It's like, oh, you just lost your video, buddy. So let's bring them back up here. Give us a little more. Broadcast lighting, drama lighting, totally different. And the two words for the day I would take away from this is, we call it morning TV. You called it breakfast television, and that just sounds so much better. So I'm going to start using that. Thank you, Carl, for that today. I'm done for the day.
And the other thing, I don't know if it's the same in Australia. In the United States, we have confidence monitors, and in Europe, they're comfort monitors. Comfort monitors. So it sounds so much better. I think that Mickey said something that was kind of good. The light, you light for your eyes for the stage, and you light for meters and monitors. When you're doing video, when you have a close up in a studio, which is a great way to think about that. For me, a lot of times when I'm working with guests, and I will admit that as soon as you start saying you're going to do a stage thing, who have been doing this for a long time, will immediately do exactly what Jeff was saying. I immediately hire somebody else, because I don't do stage lighting, so I get Tlaloc, or I get Brent By, or other people who know those things. And even then, my tendency is always to get big soft, when we're doing interviews, big soft sources as much as I can. As you get into more theater lighting, you have to kind of it's a lot more sourcey, oftentimes. But when someone's in a studio, one of the things that Jeff was just pointing to is this: people saying, oh, it's too bright. A lot of times too bright is too sourcey. So when we give them really large sources that are really diffused and not as bright, but it's just a huge volume of light, but it's spread out over a long distance, what it means is that their eyes also, their irises come in, it closes up a little bit. They don't, but it's a lot of light, and you find very much less squinting. There's much less like, oh, this is too much light, when the light source is 4 by 4 feet or 8 by 12 feet. we do ones where they're big, like big, especially, and it makes it much easier on the talent to manage that. I will say what's interesting is that, again, with cinema lighting and stage lighting, it's two different kinds of light. They're very different lights, very different approaches. But what's really fun is to do we did a show a couple years ago where we matched up my brother, who's a DP, with Tlaloc, and listening to the two of them trade notes on how to figure out how to do a little bit of both was like almost created a singularity there. It was just so interesting to listen to because they were you saw two different worlds kind of just interacting, and what they came up with, I think, was better than either one of the worlds by themselves. Next question.
Next question is from Tony Mobley. What are the panelists' thoughts on the new OpenAI updates?
It's really pushed the whole industry. You can tell everyone's a little bit frazzled because suddenly all these other folks were releasing products that weren't ready. Midjourney came out, 7 is not ready. Many other folks are doing it because they're kind of freaked out. I will say that ChatGPT still doesn't produce quite the same caliber of realism that you see with Midjourney, but its ability for you to just have a conversation about what you want. Take this out, move this over, make this darker, take this image and make it look like something else, do these other things like this. The interaction on it is so much higher than what it was before. And so I think that, but we're seeing, when someone releases something and then everybody else feels like they had to release something over the next couple of weeks, it's pretty interesting. So it's driven a whole bunch of releases that I think were kind of held up before that. And so it's pretty dramatic as far as how it's jumping forward. I'm really interested in also looking at Firebase Studio from Google. So I'm working on a product, something that I'm going to try to hack together without any code, using Firebase Studio this week to integrate back into Airtable and, set up an interface and build all these little mechanisms into it. And I think that I can just sit there and just tell it what I want and put it together. That's what I'm going to test. So hopefully in the next week or so, I'll have an opinion about how well that went. But I'll probably do it in a couple different things like ChatGPT and Claude, because those are what I've used in the past. But Google also look like they are not going to be flanked. Like they're like, hey, we've got some good products too. So once again, it just remains, kind of an exciting place to be. I watched, what was I watching last night on YouTube? It was, I was watching a YouTube video about the history of, I don't know whether it was the history of it. Oh, there's a new series called A History of Computer Graphics that someone's putting up. It's like then the second episode, and I can't remember who makes it. I'll try to figure it out. But it was interesting because they're talking about the early stuff, but they got into Adobe. And one of the things that they were talking about was when Illustrator came out, they just said, now that everybody can make these graphics, everyone's going to be doing it, and the whole industry is going to go, it's going to fall apart. And that was 40 years ago with Illustrator. And it just feels like, and then when Photoshop came out, oh, it's all over. And then when, when Quark came out, oh, it's all over, and everyone keeps on saying, well, when you make it easier, that it's all over. But the reality is that taste still means something. In fact, it probably means more when everybody can do it. It means more that you have a good eye than it did before. Yeah, go ahead, Muddy.
It just occurs to me, I don't have specific thoughts on this update, but I'm just blown away at the pace of advancement, right? I mean, it feels like not long ago when it was so obvious when it was an AI generated image because they couldn't do hands. And, it was like all these, just the pace at how good things are getting so quickly is really just amazing. I mean, there are certainly still times when it's like, that doesn't seem real, but there have been lots of times in the past couple of weeks. And so it's probably driven to this, this update and the related updates that you're talking about, where it is, people showcasing AI generated images that are indistinguishable in many ways. And I actually had a friend who is a kind of business coach and was talking about the ability she actually did a photo shoot that was an AI generated photo shoot, but it was all her items. Like it was stuff from her closet, her purses, her backdrops, but being able to orchestrate, she's like, I put this together in, 30 minutes, this whole photo shoot, 45 minutes, whereas it was a whole day to do, hair and makeup and everything else to do that. So just really impressive how quickly things are advancing and how people are using these to make workflows more efficient, I think.
And we talk about workflows too. And I do think, I really think we have to keep on paying attention to the fact that it's not just that we're not going to be able to tell the difference, or just that people are going to, I don't know, people are going to be displaced. It's the real scary thing to me is that the average person will do things that entertain everybody so much that they don't feel like they want to watch anything else. Like there's just hilarious things that people are doing with the stuff that just makes great content. They're not trying to be tricking anybody. They're just doing goofy things like showing 3 men and a baby or whatever, or 2 men and a baby. I don't remember what that show was, but they showed them all as like toddlers, and they look so much like the actors, but they're toddlers, and that's hilarious. I know it's AI, but it's so funny. And
you can totally recognize them, right? Like you said, like they're obviously babies and toddlers, but it's like exactly who that person is. Yeah.
Go ahead, Carl.
That's a great point.
So people in the industry, regardless of which company you talk to, they say like by the end of next year. So we're talking, and they were saying this pretty much at the beginning of this year. So they said 24 months from now, the problem won't be what can you do, it's storytelling. So as far as this kind of generating images, generating video, it's not going to come down to whether you can create it. That's kind of like you can grab any actor right now and put them in front of a camera. What's important will be storytelling to captivate people and to push that to the next thing. So at the moment we're doing the low-hanging fruit, which is kind of like, this is kind of the equivalent in cinema to like a camera test. So yeah, we're doing camera tests, we're doing lighting tests. That's kind of interesting, or doing costume tests. That's really what we're doing now. No one yet has pushed forward and actually created a big enough presence in YouTube or wherever to actually have an ongoing kind of narrative, kind of scripted series where they're actually using this. Now, you could go into like the direction of animation, like Bluey and that kind of stuff, but then you need voice actors. Well, do you need voice actors? So then you need scripts. Okay, do you need scripts? Can AI do every part of a show like Bluey? Like create the script, create the story, create the characters, create the costumes, go to all of that stuff. So and they're saying it's end of next year. So they're saying the end of next year, you'll be able to create a series like Bluey, and all you've got to tell the AI is the theme of the episode. That's all the human has to do. And it will go through all of its, essentially it does what AI does. It looks at everything that's come in the past that's available to it. Let's just say that. And then it will simply create something new inspired by what's happened in the past. So all a human has to do is say the theme of the episode today, or in a Punky Brewster episode for people who remember in the 80s, what was the special message for that particular episode of Punky Brewster? So you could simply just tell AI that. And now they're saying it's not available just yet, but they say end of next year. That will be possible where you can just give a theme or basic one-sentence storyline to AI, and it will pop out, be it photorealistic maybe, but definitely in some form of anime. We're seeing Studio Ghibli at the moment. They're going, that's getting quite interesting at the moment.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think that the number one is that I think that actors bring something to it that make it hard. Like it's one thing when we see these little 20-second clips and we go, hey, that's amazing, and that's fine, but can you sustain that for like Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise, and some people like him, don't like him. He's pretty good at what he does, but people are just watching Tom Cruise be Tom Cruise in different situations, right? And there is some kind of magic that makes him, or somebody else. But the point is that there's a lot of actors out there, and if they didn't have to pay $20 million a show, they would, but there's so I think that there's a humanness to the conversation that I think AI is going to have. It can make something average. I'm just not sure that we're going to see something that inspires us, especially in such a competitive market soon. I think that's the thing. And I think it devalues all that mediocre stuff so much that it'll make it harder if you're mediocre to do anything. But we'll see.
And I think you're right there. I think maybe at the end of next year, so 2 years from now, whatever, maybe what we get to is a point of like a previs for storytelling, where you can actually generate previs. I mean, for that, and then say, okay, now let's bring in the actors, and then all you have to do is give a prompt to change a previs, and then within a matter of seconds, and then you can point real actors towards the previs like we do right now.
I think that for previs and for like proof of concepts and showing people an idea of what the movie's going to be like or do whatever, I think that's huge. Like in the same way that like I have some ideas for products, and what I do is I sit there and I use AI and I build out the prototype. Now I can show it to a programmer, and when they're ready, I can show it to a programmer and say, this is what I wanted to do. Like, I know this is not clean code. I know this isn't what I could ever ship, but I have all the functionality working, and now I just need to clean it up. Next question.
Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania, looking to install a permanent mount PTZ that's about 75 to 100 feet away from rack. Was looking at Sony's auto framing camera with AI analytics, 30x zoom. Did you see anything new at NAB?
I go, Jeff.
I guess it depends on your budget line. Yeah, the newer things that we were seeing. First off, let me clarify, and this is going to tie into a question I think coming up too. There's AI and computer vision. Computer vision is not AI. That is something that's just an algorithm. You're telling it what to do. It's not thinking. It's not trying to plan it out. It's just doing what it's told to do. It's just it's a kid that's listening to you. AI in true camera tracking AI is very few and far between, and there is no cameras out there that have it built in. There are systems that are doing it. Even our go-to, which has been Mark Roberts Motion Control for years, we've had computer vision based. They struggled, and at very first were like, we're not going to call this AI because it's not AI, but it is tracking. And so that's the difference between that. So in the PTZ world, there's a whole lot of AI being thrown around. It's not automatically thinking. It's not saying, I want to track this thing. So I want to get that out of the way first. The distance you're saying, 75 to 100 foot, it depends on how tight you need that shot. So if you need a really good close-up, you could go with a Mark Roberts Motion Control like the PTA 2B with, say, a 107x Fujinon box lens and a nice back like, the UC 4000s that we use. Sure, you could do that. Be somewhere around 300,000 or so. Box lens and everything included. Just a regular PTZ, though, you're probably just going to have to settle for something like a cowboy shot and simpler.
Well, and I don't know if Dan meant, so he said it's 75 to 100 feet away from rack. So I don't know if he means, I don't know if it's 75 feet, so 75 to 100 feet away from and Dan's in the chat, so Dan let us know, but I don't know if it's 75 to 100 feet away from the stage, as opposed to, and I believe, knowing Dan, that this is a classroom. So this is a classroom environment. So you're talking about probably just a built-in, an all-in-one PTZ like the Panasonic or something like that. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah. So as far as Sony, of course, just announced an update to their AM7 cameras, which these are $12,000, but they're nice. They're 1-inch Super 16 size sensor, 20 times optical zoom. But yeah, so as Jeff said, essentially the AI is really just an algorithm for framing or tracking and framing. So you get to, so both the Sony and Canon's had this for a while in their the N500, N700, and N300 and 100. Actually, all the N series cameras have the tracking. The basic version is free, but that's just really a proof of concept that you get there. It costs an extra $1,200 to add it in. But both Sony and Canon, what they're doing is they allow you to define headroom, they allow you to define boundaries, they allow you to define tracking speed, they allow you to define if the person, like when to track them if they move to the edge of the frame, like don't always keep them centered, let them, like essentially allow them to move within a box. If they move outside of that box, then you start tracking them. Do you track them left justified, right justified, headroom? So they all have these features, and that's why the Sony is $12,000 and it comes with this feature, and Canon just charge, I think Canon's car started around $5,500, $6,000, but you pay an extra $1,000 or so for this to add this feature, and it's in camera. So Sony did have a system that was essentially a computer that ran, essentially this was computer vision. Now it's actually in camera and the camera does it, and essentially you have a controller, essentially an interface on a computer screen, then you can tell it how to track. Take a look at both Sony's implementation and Canon's implementation they do in the N500, N700, all those. They're probably more within your price range, although Sony's a little bit expensive for what it is, considering Canon's doing some stuff a little bit better for a little bit less. but that's up to you. Although the Sony does have a 20 times optical, whereas the Canon has a 15 times optical. Both have the same size sensor, yada yada, so that's all the same. But pretty much look at those two to start with for what you're looking for. They both have SDI, so they can both run cables, 300 feet, Their SDI outs are 12G as well.
Yep, and Dan said the throw is only 30 feet, so it's a long cable run, but the throw is 30 feet. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, long cable run, 75 foot to me is not a long cable run. That's the shortest probably I've ever run a cable. We're running thousands of feet and putting PTZs at the end of like miles of fiber. So in this application, from the more information you, and thanks for that information, Dan, that helps us kind of focus a little more. Yes, Carl said the Canon and also the Sony does have some really good tracking, but it's not AI, it's computer vision. For the same kind of money, though, I would honestly say is if you had an NDI camera, a camera that's controlled by NDI, you could use, or a Panasonic or a Sony that's using Visca, you can use the Mark Roberts software, that same software that we're using. Now, mine is a bigger model. It's on a server that's running 12 heads at once, but you can buy just the software and install it on a computer with a graphics card for like $2,500. So that's to start off with, like one head with auto tracking. And its tracking has many, many more variables than what I've ever seen in any of the built-in, because they're basically loading an FPGA that's on the camera with the software, the computer vision software. That's how all this is happening. It's just a programmable chip on there, and then you have to wait for the update. The reason I like the MHC Strat software is I can get updates continuously, and I can tweak and tweak and tweak. So that's my ideas.
Next question.
Lois Richter in Davis, California is asking, Jeff, what is true AI and false AI, if that hasn't already been answered?
Go, Jeff.
Well, that was just what I was touching on. I'm sorry about the rant, but I'm really big about that. It's like AI is AI, and let's respect it. It is what it is. But computer vision is what the majority of cameras, like 90%, 99%. The only one that's not is that advanced image robotics, but they're not using AI in the camera or the head. They're using a system to drive the camera and head. So that very similar to like our Mark Roberts is. It's just the Mark Roberts stuff is not AI, it's computer vision also. So I was watching them track with that Air camera, and they were feeding it in video, and they actually had it, they were rolling it back, but they were showing this live. Is like the guy would pick up a trash can. It was the CEO. They were making him pick up the trash. So he went off, picked up a trash can, and then he put the trash can down and then walked away. And I was like, oh, what's so big about that? He goes, we weren't tracking the guy. We were tracking the trash can. So they were able to tell the AI, track this box and watch that. And I was like, oh, that's just mean, because you didn't have to do facial tracking. You didn't have to do any of that stuff. Right. It's just like, I want this thing out of the video, track that. So we're looking at it for cars. We're looking at it for one of the things he's really big in and doing a lot of is horses. So tracking horses is a lot harder than you expect. And so that was one of the things. So doing horses and equestrian type stuff. Dogs, it was a dog show. It could distinguish between breeds of dogs. That's right. That to me, that's AI. That's the
yeah. Absolutely. If we didn't get to your question tonight, of course, I know that you may be blown away, but we do this every morning. so we're going to send your questions back to your notes, and if you want to bring it in next extra hours next Monday, or you can bring it in tomorrow morning, and we'll the other panels will run with it from there. So anyway, so definitely throw those questions back to us. Now we're going to jump into our media recommendations. Carl, go ahead and start us off.
So I'm going to suggest something. This is Audio University. We speak about this a lot on office hours sometimes. So this is a YouTube channel called Audio University. I would suggest that if you're interested in audio, just watch it and essentially follow the suggested videos that it gives you. So just let it play, and because essentially they're all linked, but it's also a good problem solver. So if you're trying to figure out something from not really a 30,000 foot point of view, but maybe from a 1,000 foot point of view, Audio University is a very good idea to give you a basic understanding of gain staging, let's say, but there's a lot of other things, to where to get started to actually solve the problem you may need, or how to find a solution to a problem you may not even know you have. So my suggestion is, if you're interested in audio, or if you do want to do some more work, or you want to have the ability to solve some problems in audio because you can't afford an A1 and maybe you're the jack of all trades on your production, Audio University, and just go to the video that attracts you the most, and then let it decide which video to go to next, because it will usually be related to the video you just watched.
I'll go ahead, Jeff.
I just recently watched, just because there's hardly any content on right now, at least I feel like it is, like I've watched everything. My wife and I watched G20 last night.
How did you like that?
It was typical, but it was entertainment, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that was the whole thing, and I enjoyed the entertainment side of it. Towards the end, they get the hacker thing. That's always one of those things that drives me insane.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm just going to attach to this.
Don't. No, it's too new. It's too new. You can't say anything. You can't say anything there. So
that was one that was. No, that's not how that works. But overall, it was pretty good. But they were talking about deep fakes and AI and all that, and that was was kind of like, okay, that's kind of timely. But it was entertaining. Yeah,
G20. Yeah, no, absolutely. MADI.
Yeah, the one I'm going to recommend is a YouTube channel. This is an illustration. A guy named Jared Owen does illustrations. But this one in particular on the sphere, not only are they great illustrations, he really explains so much about the technology that he is illustrating. And so I learned so much about the sphere, and I was inspired by our discussion around NAB, and folks were just out in Las Vegas, and the technology that goes into the sphere and all of these kind of individual audio signals that go seat by seat was really explained and shown in this illustration. And so I love everything that this guy does, but this video in particular. So Jared Owen Animations on YouTube.
That's great. Alex?
Yeah, so two quick things. So my new current show recommendation would be The Last of Us. They just launched season 2 on HBO, and I'm a massive fan of those games. I've played The Last of Us Part 1 and 2 many, many times over. I consider it some of the best storytelling ever, period, in video games. They're firing on all cylinders. Episode 1 of season 2 is out now. And one piece of physical media, not a lot of people have seen this movie, but this 1988 movie called Tokyo Pop, starring Carrie Hamilton, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 38. She's Carol Burnett's daughter. Kino Lorber did a 4K scan of the original film. It looks great it's a 1080p Blu-ray, but scanned at 4K. And it's a great, it's a really heartwarming, kind of charming, funny movie about a girl who has dreams of being a pop star, and she ends up going to Japan, meets this guy named Hiro, ends up doing all these covers for money. But anyways, great movie.
It's great. I mentioned it earlier in the show. My recommendation will be this. This is the pioneers of computer graphics, the 1980s. And so this is episode 2. So it's just getting started. And as someone who was, in some of these, like this is, it actually showed, let's see, there's John Knoll, who was my former supervisor. And so it was interesting to see some of the stories that they talk about, but they're talking about the history of PostScript and Illustrator and some of the early things. And I think that a lot of times we just know how these things work, but it's really fun to go back and really and I've been talking about doing something like this for, I don't know, 2 decades of just understanding how we got all these things to happen. And I think it's, it could be a little bit smoother, but I think that overall it's a really good primer to take a look at if you're trying to understand how this all got to where it is. Carl, Jeff, Alex, MADI, so good to have you guys here. Thanks so much. It was really a fun hour. And thanks to the all the great questions from all the producers. Thank you for asking those questions there and keeping this going. Before the show, we kind of put out a thing like, "Hey, we're doing the show. Does anyone got any questions?" And everyone really jumped in. We got so many. We had to send some back reminder that was send it back to your notes. We didn't throw them away. You can put them in either next week for the next extra hours, or you can put them in anytime during the weekdays. We answer those questions 7 days a week, and we record them 5 days a week in the morning. Also, a thanks to our crew, Alan, Peter, Taylor, and Jeff. Jeff is both on the panel and then also making sure this all happens. Yeah, this is an extra, this is a, we're not only are we doing a fun show, but we're really testing Vector and figuring out the best way to get the stuff done in the cloud. This is all produced in the cloud, and we're constantly working on the process of that. So we just want to thank the crew for working on that so well. And now, I don't know what we say at the end, other than bye-bye.